Good afternoon. Welcome to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Minneapolis Board of Estimate and Taxation for March 27th, 2024. My name is Steve Brandt, and I'm the president of the board. This time I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Commissioner Fry.
Here.
Abene.
Here.
Payne.
Present.
Chuktai is absent. Vice President Priest-Inson is absent. President Brandt.
Here.
There are 4 members present.
Thank you. Commissioner Priest-Inson contacted me shortly before the meeting to indicate she had a hospitalization in the family that would prevent her from attending. So the record will reflect that we have a quorum. I also now want to offer an acknowledgement that we meet on the land of Indigenous peoples who preceded most of us here in this space. We'll now proceed to our agenda, which was posted for public access to the city's Legislative Management Information System, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Board members, the agenda for today's meeting is before us. Could I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a proper motion before us. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. Next is the acceptance of minutes from the March 13th, 2024 meeting. May I please have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a proper motion before us. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the minutes are accepted as presented. Item number 4 is the acceptance of public comment. Clerk, do we have anybody signed up to speak today?
President Brandt, we do not.
Thank you. We will then proceed to item 5 on the agenda, which is a presentation of the 2024 assessment report from Robert Williamson of the City Assessor's Office. Mr. Williamson, welcome. Please come forward.
Good afternoon, President Brandt and members of the board. Let me just go ahead and my name is Rob Williamson, and I am the appraisal supervisor with the Minneapolis Assessing Department. While I am no substitute for the expertise of the city assessor, Rebecca Malmquist, I am presenting the 2024 Minneapolis Assessment Report in her place, as unfortunately she has commitments that do not allow her to be here today. As some of you have already been presented with this information or reviewed it, I will try to be as succinct when possible. So, going forward, the Minneapolis Assessing Department recently completed the January 2nd, 2024 assessment of approximately 131,000 properties as part of the annual process dictated by state statute. Notices of valuation and classification, also known as value notices, were mailed March 15th, and we are now in the process of responding to taxpayer inquiries about their 2024 assessment prior to the Local Board of Appeal and Equalization convening. The 2024 assessment is used to calculate the 2025 property taxes, as the budget and levy are set after the assessment and is determined, and then taxes are paid the following year. This can be confusing for taxpayers, as tax statements are mailed at approximately the same time as the value notices. The data that we use to set the annual assessment reflects arm's length transactions that occurred between October 2022 and September 2023. The illustration at the bottom of this slide shows how every property's share of taxes is based on its market value, classification, and tax rate. Market values are determined by examining real estate market transaction and market trends. Classifications are determined by the use of the property as of the assessment date, and a class rate is applied as set by the state legislature. The tax rate is determined using budgets of local governments such as city, county, school districts, and watersheds. To expand on this process, the chart on this slide gives examples of tax calculation for various property types in Minneapolis. Tax capacity is determined by taking the market value in the second column and multiplying it by the class rate in the third column. As shown here, if a residential property on the first row and a commercial property on the bottom row both have the same market value of $300,000, the residential property will pay approximately half of what the commercial property does because their net tax capacity will be different based on their class rate.
Mr. Williamson, could I ask you to hold for just a minute? I want the clerk to note that Councilmember Chuktai has joined the meeting. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. The class rate for a residential property is 1%, and the class rate for a commercial property is 2%. This is a simple example for illustrative purposes, as there can be more complex factors that determine the tax calculation, like special programs, exclusions, and penalties. This graph is a historical view of Minneapolis's total estimated market value across all property types. In 2024, the overall market value decreased 3.1% to $65.4 billion. Previously, the last time Minneapolis saw an overall decrease in estimated market value was from the 2008 to 2012 assessments. All through those years, we saw a decrease in assessed value. Included in the 2024 total is $1.06 billion in new construction market value that was added to the rolls, which is down slightly from last year's figure of new construction, which was $1.08 billion. This EMV total does not include state-assessed property, such as utilities and railroads. This slide shows the breakdown of the three major property type categories by their share of total 2024 market value on the left, and then the shift to their share of the total net tax capacity on the right. Once the differing class rates are applied to the estimated market value, residential properties' share of the tax base goes down, while the commercial and industrial property share increases. The graph on this slide shows the historical view of the tax capacity as a percentage of the total tax capacity by property type. When comparing the two bars on the right, which is 2023 and 2024, you can see the shift from 2023 to 2024 assessment. The net tax capacity of the commercial industrial property decreased, and the residential property increased, both over slightly over 1%. Overall, this means that residential properties will bear a greater burden of the taxes payable in 2025 than they did in payable 2024. Here is a map of the 2024 estimated market value by ward. The pie charts are broken down by the three main property types. The larger the size of the pie slice, the greater the percentage of the estimated market value in that ward. Of note, neighborhoods in and around downtown have a far greater share of commercial and apartment value, while neighborhoods further away are predominantly more residential. This chart shows the change in estimated market value from 2023 to 2024 by ward across all property types, with the blue bars indicating a decrease and the green showing an increase. The wards where there is a continued value growth in green are the wards with more affordable home price points. Starter homes have the largest pool of buyers, and so with increased competition, prices generally will continue to increase. This slide shows a historical look at the year-to-year estimated market value changes as an aggregate for all residential property types in Minneapolis over the past 10 years. In 2024, residential properties saw an overall decrease of 1.3%. This decrease is largely attributable to the rise in interest rates impacting affordability of homes. This is having a cooling effect on residential property values. The increasing cost of new mortgage monthly payments, along with the low inventory of homes, are impacting demand in the Minneapolis metro area. Other jurisdictions aren't quite seeing this trend, as Ramsey County is seeing a sustained increase in residential EMV from 2023 to 2024 of 3.65%. In 2023, they had a residential increase of 3.69%. This chart further breaks down the change in residential estimated market value from 2023 to 2024 by separating residential property into three groups: condo townhomes, duplex triplexes, and single-family property. Overall, condo townhomes were the only residential property type to see an increase in the value in 2024. Here we have stats reflecting the 2024 assessment of residential property. Of note are the measurements of uniformity and equity between properties that have sold and what their estimated market value is. The Minneapolis Assessing Department uses these mandated statistical tools to make sure our estimated market values comply with state and international requirements to ensure accuracy of our data and that similar properties are being assessed equitably. The first measurement is the median sales ratio. This ratio is determined by dividing an individual assessment of a property that had sold by its sale price. This ratio is an expression of how the assessed value relates to the sale price and lets us know if we are over or undervaluing the property. The median ratio is found by taking a look at all the sales ratios in a data range and then finding the median of the calculated ratios. An acceptable median ratio is between 90 to 105%. However, to be consistent with surrounding jurisdictions, we do have conversations across city borders, and the Minneapolis Assessing Department strives to further improve our data by aiming for a median ratio of 95% along with the rest of Hennepin County. The second measurement is the coefficient of dispersion, and I skipped ahead a slide. There we go. The coefficient of dispersion, or the COD. It measures uniformity of the assessment and how far away assessments are from the median sales ratio. An acceptable COD level for residential property is below 15, and our office meets that requirement each year across all residential property types. The last measurement is the price-related differential, or PRD. It measures the vertical equity of assessments, or stated differently, measures the even distribution of tax burden across differing property values. When lower valued properties are assessed at a greater percentage of market value than higher valued properties, the assessment is considered regressive. And when lower valued properties are assessed at a lower percentage of market value than higher valued properties, the assessment is considered progressive. Based on the guidelines we follow, assessments should neither be overly progressive or regressive. The acceptable range for a PRD to fall in is between 97 and 103, and we meet this range for each property type. So this chart is a historical look at the described measurements of uniformity for residential property over the past 10 years. One thing to point out is that we have seen a drastic decrease in sales volume since the transaction peak in 2022. With less sales, we have less data to draw upon when setting our assessment, and it appears that we are no longer in the strong seller's market that we have been in the past few years. This graph shows the comparison of the median sale price to the median assessed value over the past 10 years. The median EMV has been below the median sale price for every year for the past 10 years except in 2019. This was corrected in 2020 and shows the improvement as the years go on. Of note, taking the median assessed market value and dividing by the median sale price will not result in a median sales ratio, as the sales ratios are calculated individually and the median is selected from that data range. The median residential EMV decreased 1.8% from 2023 to 2024. So with this, we have a breakdown of single-family residential value percent changes from 2023 to 2024. Nearly 50% of all residential properties saw a decrease of up to 5%. And here's a map of the single-family residential property growth by community rather than ward. As you can see, most of Minneapolis saw slight change or decreases, while the Northwest communities saw more increases. As mentioned, supply and demand in these areas seem to indicate value growth is due to affordable price points. Starter homes are going to see a larger pool of buyers. With increased competition, prices generally will continue to increase. While we don't have a map included in this report broken down by neighborhood, we can get you that information as well. So here is a comparison of residential values by ward with various stats we have been discussing, including new construction, net change in total value, median EMV, number of sale transactions, and median sale price, median sales ratio, and COD. Switching over now to commercial industrial properties, looking at them for 2024 commercial values, when separated from industrial values, see an overall decrease of 8.7%. The industrial market increased by 1.9%. The large drop in commercial EMV is centered mostly around the downtown Minneapolis office towers. The large vacancies were created by the pandemic, changing office work, and the industry shifting to largely remote work. Businesses now require far less space, so as leases have moved to renewal post-pandemic, downsizing and large amounts of office space inventory are the result. In 2023, the industrial market was seeing large growths, and that helped to counter some of this decrease in the commercial space. But unfortunately, in 2024, the industrial market has started to cool somewhat. So while it is still increasing, it's not to the extent that it was last year, and it cannot counter the decrease in commercial properties. This is a chart of a historical look at the total commercial industrial values over the past 10 years. While we saw an overall decrease in 2024, the total commercial and industrial values are still above the first year we saw post-pandemic impact, which was for the 2021 assessment. To break these values down further, this graph shows the change in commercial and industrial values across various geographical submarkets. This slide separates the downtown and uptown markets, which saw decreases, and the remainder of the city saw increases. As far as the impact, however, downtown is approximately 58.96% of the commercial EMV and 50.47% of the total commercial industrial combined EMV. Uptown is 8.18% of the commercial EMV and 6.89% of the commercial industrial combined EMV.
I'm sorry, Mr. Williamson, could you repeat those figures, please?
Yes, absolutely. Downtown is 58.96% of the commercial EMV and 50.47% of the commercial industrial combined EMV. Uptown is 8.1% of the commercial EMV and 6.89% of the commercial industrial combined EMV.
Thank you.
So reviewing the same measurements of uniformity we apply to residential property, we see the median ratios and COD are in the acceptable range. Yet when looking at the PRD, it is slightly out of range, mostly due to the small number of sales that we have for commercial and industrial property. But this figure has improved from 2023 and will continue to be watched for next year's assessment. And now we look at the 2024 change in value for apartment properties. Apartment values decreased 9.5% from 2023 to 2024. This is attributable to high interest rates and affecting apartment owners, as it has made it difficult for smaller apartment owners to acquire financing or to refinance to help make debt service. There were several apartment portfolio sell-offs, and with the decreased competition due to lack of financing, buyers were able to acquire properties at lower prices than we were traditionally seeing. Again, the statistical measures of uniformity of apartment values are within acceptable ranges for the 2024 assessment. As mentioned previously, value notices for the 2024 assessment have been mailed. The notices are color-coded in pink to try and match with the tax statements that will be mailed next year, which will also be pink. This is an initiative across Hennepin County to try to help match up the notices with the tax statements to make them a little bit less confusing. If a property owner has questions or concerns regarding their value, they should contact the appraiser listed on the back of their value notice. Information about the local appeal process is on the value notice itself and on the Minneapolis Assessing Department website. There are also resources on our website for property owners that would like to research their property value, including our neighborhood sales finder, neighborhood value change data, property tax estimator, as well as the use of the Minneapolis Property Information Search. As far as key dates concerning the 2024 assessment and the local option to appeal, valuation notices were mailed on March 15th, which started the season for us. The local Board of Appeal and Equalization convenes on April 15th and reconvenes on April 16th, and will continue to hold sessions until there are no more cases before them. Once a taxpayer has gone through the local board, if they still wish to contest the board's determination, then they can proceed to meet with the Hennepin County Board of Appeal and Equalization when they convene on June 17th. To do our best to inform taxpayers, we have already met with the Neighborhood and Community Relations and held neighborhood association meetings with them. We are also reaching out to schedule individual neighborhood meetings, and we continue to welcome all opportunities to meet with property owners and taxpayers. So the last slide that I have for you today is a map of our annual residential quintile reevaluation that needs completed each year. We visit these properties on site to confirm our records to ensure the quality of our underlying characteristic data. We have just under 23,000 residential parcels to review this year, and those neighborhoods are highlighted in green. So in closing, I thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak with you. I thank the Minneapolis Assessing Department staff who helped compile this report, and thank you to the City Assessor, Rebecca Malmquist, who trusted me to present this report in her stead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. If you'll stay, we'll see if my colleagues have any questions for you. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Excellent presentation. You filled in very well in Assessor Malmquist's absence. By the way, I believe she's chairing the National Assessor's presentation right now as the president, which is a cool deal to have in our city, the foremost expert on assessing. And again, really appreciate your work, which is a very sobering outlook on where things are presently for this upcoming budget cycle as well as in years to come. We thought that this reduction in value would perhaps take place last year for this year's budget cycle. And in fact, it will take place this year for next year's budget cycle. But the consequences are significant. You know, the last 6 to 7 years, we've generally been between 5 and 7% increase to the annual levy. Now, as we all know, a 5 to 7% increase in the levy doesn't necessarily equate to a 5 to 7% increase in your taxes. In fact, several of the last 7 years, even with a 5 to 7% increase, your average homeowner or even renter saw either a stagnation of their taxes or a reduction in their taxes. And that was because we were developing a significant number of parcels, and there were parcels that, for instance, generated $30,000 a year in property tax revenue with a surface parking lot on them that now generate $2.5 million in property tax revenue per year with a big building on it. And that additional influx of potential revenue that we could realize into the system has allowed for people on average to pay less, or at the very least not a lot more. Those days are done. at least in the immediate future, with the reduction in value of several of these commercial buildings, as you mentioned, the reduction of value of some of these downtown assets. It means a few of these buildings alone will generate about as much revenue, and I don't know the exact figure here, but as other wards in their entirety. And so when those reductions in value happen, it's not like we can just collect less tax revenue. We still have things we need to do. The result is going to be that people in our city pick up the tab, residents in our city pick up the tab. And as was seen, given the regressive nature of a property tax system, it means that seniors and low-income people are going to be disproportionately impacted. So we got to look at this very wide-eyed. We have to understand the consequences now of increasing the levy that are significantly different than they were in the past. A couple percentage points different, or percentage point difference will have a much more significant impact on people. And right now we're looking at a 6.2% levy increase for this year's budget. And a 6.1% levy increase for the following years, and that's not like an official statement. That is the plan that we have adopted, that we have always planned to move forward with. And even at those rates, as we've seen, just to cover those current service levels, it will impact people way differently than it has in previous years. So as commissioners on the Board of Estimate and Taxation, as mayor and council members, we've got to approach this recognizing the really significant trajectory that we're seeing right now, because people, whereas this has not been the primary, taxes have not been the primary discussion from the dais or in City Hall in general. That'll change. And we've got to wake up about it, all of us.
Do any additional commissioners have questions? Commissioner Payne.
Thank you, President Brandt. I'll actually echo Commissioner Fry's sentiment around the paradigm-shifting nature of what some of these valuations are implicating for our budget. My question is really grounded in that paradigm shift idea, which is maybe a cliche, but I look at something like the class rate broken down into three categories: residential, apartment, commercial, industrial. Could you just give me a little bit more context of the history of how those class rates came to be, how it came to be those three categories, and maybe more specifically around, we have the class rate for residential at 1% and for commercial industrial at 2%, and then apartment somewhere in between. Is this like an incentive or a reflection of the different ways that these asset categories have been historically valued, or is it arbitrary? I'm just trying to understand it, because in my mind, there's a number of ways I want to attack how we think about raising revenue to operate a government, but I want to at least understand where we're coming from. So if you could give me just a little bit more context about how like class rates are determined, and is it like a state statute thing, is another good question.
Sure. President Brandt, Commissioner Payne, thank you for the question. The class rates are set by the state legislature. I'm not sure historically when they were first determined, but I can tell you there are several different class rates ranging across a multitude of different property types and classifications. I don't want to speak to the intent of the legislature, but I believe the impetus for creating so many different classifications is to try to account for the tax implications and expectations of those various property users. So as you saw in our demonstration, it's tiered based on property being used as residential homesteads having the lowest class rate. So I feel that the legislatures set that out to try to account for those, since there's so many of them as compared to other types of properties, not having a disproportionate amount of the tax burden. But Again, it's set by the state legislature, unfortunately.
So this is more of an example rather than like a comprehensive collection of all the class rates that we'd be subject to.
Commissioner Payne, that is correct.
That's great. Because my thinking is essentially that, as people moved from working in person to working remote, the first question is, will we ever return back to the previous pattern? My thought is that that's not going to happen. I think that a lot of people are. I personally prefer working in person. That's my personality type. I'm also very productive when I work remote. I'm happy in both of those contexts, and I think that's true for a lot of people. A lot of people have different personal circumstances, whether it's raising kids or being a caregiver or other considerations. I just don't know that we're ever going to go back to the expectation that people will work in person and all gather in a central urban core. And so I want us to think about, what are the actions that we would need to take to imagine a different way that we raise revenue. And, the profit per employee has arguably been unaffected by the pandemic, depending on what sector you're in, especially for some of the knowledge work sectors, which are becoming a larger component of our economy. Does this mean that we need to have a different conversation at the state around the local government aid formula and how much of that tax revenue is getting distributed to local municipalities? Because maybe we're not going to capture the same amount of value through property taxes anymore, and maybe we shouldn't expect that going forward. So we're at this time now where we're either going to have to significantly raise the levy, significantly cut taxes or cut spending to, make the cost of living be reasonable for folks. But I think that that's going to be our immediate concern as we sit here as the BET board, but in other roles as, say, the president of city council or, having to go lobby at the state. I think we need to start thinking about what are the other frameworks for us to approach raising revenue, because I don't know that we will get back to what we would perceive as a norm that predated the pandemic. Those are just my thoughts.
Seeing nobody else, I will. Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Benny.
Thank you, President Brandt. Actually, I was late putting my thing up here, but just another comment about, the mayor talked about the added pressures to residential property owners, and of course that's always a concern. One of the things that I want to mention that the Park Board is doing with some of our lobbying work this year and last is seeing if there's any interest in the state around the property tax credit program. We're doing it particularly related to special assessments, private property assessments for trees. But just a reminder to people that the state does have a little bit of a relief valve that's been in place for a long time for renters and for homestead property owners to get a little bit back on property taxes when they're meeting certain income thresholds. Or the tax goes up a certain amount. Now, I'm not suggesting that that means that the property tax increase can go wild because there's this relief valve, but I think it helps to understand that mechanism is out there. So I'll just, my mother she lives in a co-op, she's on a fixed income, and anyway, she said it helps her out a lot every year. So I just want to remind people that exists, and that might be another mechanism that we have here. The cities have a reality of a shrinking property tax overall pie, and I think we're not the only one in the state. I'm quite sure of that. So that the state can acknowledge that, and as maybe other, as Commissioner Payne mentioned, other strategies are deployed for essentially funding local and state government, even local government, that mechanism is fine-tuned a little bit more. So I just want to make that comment.
I have a series of questions and a couple of comments. First of all, I'd like to amplify Commissioner Benny's mention of property tax credits and offer anybody who may be suffering from insomnia and watching our meeting that I pulled together a list of all the state property tax credits that are available, and I'd be glad to send it to anybody who emails me at my Board of Estimate email, which is steve.brandt@minneapolismn.gov. I also see a lot of merit in what Commissioner Payne is suggesting in terms of diversifying the city's sources of revenue. I hope that the council, that's beyond the realm of the Board of Estimate, but I hope the council will be creative in exploring those ideas, and perhaps the recovery of the downtown special taxes will allow the city general fund to have some additional relief in that area. You mentioned that it's been since 2008, 2012 since the city saw a drop in tax capacity, or EMV. And this year we have the trifecta, all three classes of property: residential, apartment, and commercial industrial. Do you know, do you have any recollection of whether the last trough that we saw, which lasted for several years, was a sharing of all three types of property classifications sharing in the decline? And do you have any expectation as to whether this trough will be shorter lived than the one in 2008, 2012?
President Brandt, I don't have that information in front of me as far as the historical information breakdown. We can certainly get that for you. As far as the expectation of how long this current downward trend is going to last, as some of the board members have indicated, there's a lot of uncertainty with how offices and that entire industry is going to pivot. So I can't really speculate as to when we are going to see an upturn, at least from the commercial office position. I would say the residential component, if interest rates go back down to a more manageable level, I think we'll start to see residential values rebound as a result. So it's really just when that is going to occur, when the Fed is going to start cutting those rates and bring them back down to a more manageable level. And then on the apartments, I would say it's the same thing. As soon as the interest rates start to come down, financing becomes more available, that we'll start to see those rates go, or I'm sorry, the values go back up, because the occupancy is there. We're not seeing dramatic shifts in our occupancy for apartments. It's just that the participants in those markets aren't able to get the financing to secure the properties. And so with less buyers in the market, they're able to drive down the prices.
Thank you for that. I would suggest that perhaps there's already some good news on the residential side, at least in terms of recovering from the drop. I took a look at the Minneapolis Association of Area Association of Realtors data for February, which compares median sales price for Minneapolis and other jurisdictions now versus a year ago. And it looks to me like the cutoff period for your assessment data coincided with the bottom of the slight drop that they saw, and that it has since recovered, at least as of February. It appears that the median sales price is up to where it was a year ago. And obviously that's interest rate dependent, as you said, but let's hope that continues. Any comment on that? Are you seeing the same thing?
President Brandt, I apologize. I have not looked at that data source that you've mentioned, but I don't disagree with it. And the market in general is cyclical in nature. When things go down, it spends a little time there and then it circles back up to coming back up. It rarely does it stay stagnant. So hopefully, if there's not continuing outside factors that depress the market, it will start to recover.
Okay. Also looking at that data, I did see St. Paul was up 6.2% in Mars data for the year ending in September, which would be the end of their period of analysis as well. Richfield was up 1.3%, Robbinsdale was up 7.8%, the balance of Hennepin County was up 4.1%. Now, obviously, these are different submarkets. Do you think that's but everybody's facing the same interest rate situation. Would your analysis be that reflects perhaps lower value homes in some of those markets that would have the same experience, say, as the 4th and 5th wards showed?
President Brandt, I apologize. I can't really answer that because I'm not an expert in those particular markets, but I don't discount that theory.
That's right. Your expertise is more on the commercial industrial side. I realize that. I just want to make sure I understand the factors affecting the apartment market. They have the same interest rate issues. And you're saying that the higher interest rates have made it more difficult for smaller, perhaps less capitalized apartment owners to bid on properties, and indeed maybe some have disposed of properties. And therefore there hasn't been the competition for portfolio sell-offs?
President Brandt, that is correct. That's what I've heard in speaking with the apartment owners here in Minneapolis. And that's what we're seeing as we're going through our verification of apartment sales.
Sure. That's a little distressing, just given that apartments have really been a very helpful factor in Minneapolis in increasing the tax base. Over the last 5 years, we've had $3.5 million in new construction for apartment buildings in the city. I can speak from experience. I have apartments in my neighborhood where the property was assessed at $700,000 roughly when it was a drive-in and then a restaurant, and then it jumped up to over $10 million when the property was developed as a modest-sized apartment building, maybe 30 units. And there's another one about 4 blocks from me that was a underutilized old grocery store building that had migrated into other types of retail, and the building that's sitting there now is worth at least $34 million. I may be off by $10 million or so, but that's a big boost to the city's tax base, and so apartments can't come back soon enough as far as I'm concerned. I'm curious about the fact that the commercial EMV decline, particularly downtown, which originated in the pandemic factors and the loss of the income stream, is hitting now after going up in some previous years. Does that reflect the timing of lease expiration and renegotiation of leases, or is there another factor?
President Brandt, yes, basically, so the pandemic went into full swing March of 2020, so we wouldn't have seen the initial impact of that until the assessment date as of January 2nd, 2021. And still, those leases are typically for multiple years, so there wasn't an opportunity for clients to renegotiate at that point. And so as we're going down the line, what's really impacting the values is that now we're starting to see sales of properties downtown. The Kickerneck building, most notably, is not a part of this study that set the 2024 assessment, but that sold far lower than what that has historically been assessed. So it is now that buyers and sellers are moving past the initial uncertainty of the pandemic and are now starting to make decisions on what to do with their properties. That's what's showing us the data more than anything, and that's what's causing the impact to start to happen now.
How are your tax appeal numbers in terms of increase in the number of cases? Excuse me.
President Brandt, so the appeal deadline to the Minnesota Tax Court is April 30th of every year. So we don't have a full roster of our 2023 Pay 24 tax court petitions, but I believe the last I saw we were on par with what we had for 2022 pay 23. I don't show any signs of it slowing.
And I've heard some residential homeowners talking about appealing their declines in valuation, which sounds somewhat counterintuitive because if your value declines more than the city's as a whole, your proportionate share of the tax increase that the mayor alluded to earlier is going to be somewhat better off. What advice would you give to somebody who is considering an appeal because of a devaluation of their house?
President Brandt, believe it or not, every year we do have taxpayers contact us about the reduction in their assessment. People are concerned about their value, whether it goes up or down. So I would just suggest to any taxpayer, if they feel that their assessment is inaccurate, that they contact us right away, and we're happy to discuss it with them.
Thank you. I also want to, you presented some of the data regarding the vertical equity in sales ratios. And as I did in our agenda setting meeting, and I wish Assessor Malmquist were here to hear this today, but she heard it in that meeting. There was a body of research that was done several years ago by the University of Chicago that looked at the fact that in a variety of jurisdictions across the entire country, not just Minneapolis, the lower value homes were being assessed at a higher percentage of their sales price, of their sales price than high value homes. And had a chance to hear the individual who quarterbacked that research at Chicago last summer, and then came back and took a look at the data for Minneapolis once more that he had accumulated. And I'm happy to say that there is much greater equity between the low end of the market and the high end of the market in terms of that calculation. And that's a credit to the assessor's office and to Assessor Malmquist, and I want to publicly acknowledge that. So, any other questions? Okay. Seeing no further discussion, I'll ask the clerk to receive and file this report. Thank you, Mr. Williamson.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is an update on the executive secretary search. I wanted to just inform the other members of the board that at the suggestion of, I believe, the mayor, we added CFO Dye as an ex officio member. Commissioner Abeni then suggested that we add Julie Wiseman, her Yushani's equivalent at the park board as finance chief, as another ex officio member, and I ran that by the two other committee members who are Commissioner Chugtai and Commissioner Priest-Stinson, and they asked them to tell me if they objected, and I heard nothing, so we'll proceed in that way. We are going to meet after this meeting just for the purposes of scheduling some meetings related to the search and the discussions we need to have. I've been in touch with Devin Smith of HR, who is assigned to this one. She's checking that the proper job code still exists for this position, which was last advertised as a senior advisor, getting us a position number and getting ready to put it out when we have a position description on, I think it's called NeoGov. And I have sent to all the members, I did this about a month ago, the job description that was used previously when we hired or contemplated hiring an executive secretary, and I urge all of you to take a look at that and give me your feedback on it. So with that, if there are questions, I'll answer them. If not, I'll ask the clerk to receive and file this update. And we've completed all business to come before us, unless anybody has anything else to add. So without objection, we stand adjourned.